Hello everybody, welcome to Red Tool House. I've been running into a lot of people lately looking for land, of course. It seems there's a desire to move out from the urban areas and the suburban areas and to get away into a more rural setting. So when people are doing this research, they're taking advantage of digital technology like Google Maps to research the land that they're looking at because they can't lay eyes on it since it's pretty far away for them. And technology has really been able to make land search much more convenient. You can shop from the convenience of your own living room. But there's some old skills that I think are super important, even with technology, that you need to have. And one of those is being able to read a topo map. So come along on this video. I want to show you why it's important to be able to read a topo map and use some real life examples right here on our 100 acres here at Red Tool House. So come along. So the need for this video topic came apparent to me after my trip back from Arizona. Actually, it was during my research for the trip for Arizona. So I was landing in Phoenix, but I was going to have to drive northeast to Show Low, and I knew there was going to be an elevation change. When I did the research, found out there's going to be about 6,000 feet of elevation change. So looking at the best route, I just do like any people do and get on Google Maps and check it out. And I noticed something peculiar about the route that I was choosing when I saw the road have this specific feature. Now, there's only one legitimate thing that causes the road to do that, other than drunk engineers, and that's terrain. This is the Salt River Canyon. And when I look at that on Google Maps just flat, it's like, okay, why in the world did it do that? Well, if I switch over to satellite imagery, it shows me, gives me a little more intel. It's like, oh, okay, that's obviously a canyon, that the road's winding down that canyon and coming back. But just how much relief are we talking about here? And so I can switch to 3D model of Google Earth and be able to get a pretty good representation of what's going on. However, that 3D representation still pales in comparison to what I actually saw, laid my eyes on when I drove through that area. Made a big difference and really showed me just how much relief we were talking about there. So this got me thinking, people looking for land that's not close to them, so they can't just drive to look at it, they're running into these same situations. They see it on Google Earth, even satellite or 3D view, and think they've got a decent idea of the lay. But when you actually get to it, there's so much more detail to it, but the land itself obviously could have some hidden surprises for sure. So I thought, well, wait a minute, what would we do in this situation? Well, we need to go to the topo map, and the topo map will help us uncover any hidden surprises. And I think this comes into play especially when you're looking in the Appalachian region or anywhere there's mountains or considerable slope. Because you could look at a piece of land and you look at a flat map, which hopefully you don't just stop there, and you say, well, that's pretty flat land in West Virginia or whatever, that's cool. Or you go to the extreme, you look at the 3D, and the way the 3D model represents, you think, well, a mountain goat can't hang on to that. Why in the world would anyone ever consider buying that? So the topo is going to help you be able to drill down and look at those details. Let's switch to a map view of my 100 acres here, and we use this as a really good example. So if we just bring up a regular map view of my place, it's really not helpful at all. You can kind of see the house and the barn and some of the driveway are marked, but other than that, there's absolutely no features of my 100 acres listed there. When we switch to a two-dimensional satellite view, we can see the forest and get a little idea that there is some elevation. You can notice there's some shading, some shadows there that kind of give you a hint that there is some elevation that happens. When we switch to 3D, it's informative, but it's very limited, of course, and it can be deceiving. My 3D, I think, looks deceiving in the sense that they just look like 45-degree angle mountains coming down. Now, Google has a newer feature called Google Terrain, which is basically a rudimentary topo. When you switch to that, you just see some basic contours with shading that they've created to give you an idea of where peaks and valleys may be. But I think ours are really open if we drop the USGS topo map over my property. This shows us a much more detailed element of the land. I want to take a quick second to thank the sponsor of this video. And I've actually talked about this or kind of teased this before. This is a company by the name of DooGee. I'm not excited about the name, but it is what it is. But DooGee they sent me this smartphone. And for those of you been following the channel for a while, you may have noticed that video quality changes from time to time. Over 700 and some videos, of course, you're going to try different things. Well, in the last couple of years, I've switched to shooting everything on a smartphone. Most recently, I've been using the iPhone 14 Pro. Well, DooGee knows that, and of course sent me this phone, and it has, it's an Android phone, so it has some great features associated with smartphones and the Android technology. But the thing that really got my attention was the camera details. So as we were talking back and forth on it, they're like, well, here's some of the things with the camera. So, okay, cool, let's check it out. So over the past several videos that you've seen, I've been shooting with this, and I use it as a secondary camera. And the only reason why I've been using it as secondary is because my mic, all the wireless stuff I have is lightning plug, so it's compatible with iPhone. But since I've been using this and see how good of quality it is, then I can now upgrade. Then I can now purchase the wireless mics that are compatible with Android style plugs. I believe that's a Type-C plug. So the things I like about this camera, of course, the quality is good. Is it exactly identical to the 14 Pro? I would say not. But when you look at the price point, this thing's around the $400 mark. At least it was when we first started talking about this. Compare that to the price point of the iPhone 14 Pro, then that video quality difference is negligible. And also this thing has a case. It is its case, so you don't have to buy the accessories. This thing is built like a tank, so it can handle a lot of shock. It can handle some rough wear and tear. It is a bit heavier than the iPhone, but it's definitely good. If I'm out here in the pig pasture shooting and it falls over and hits the mud, I don't have to freak out as much as I would when the iPhone does that. So the phone has great battery life. The different video settings are very robust. In fact, it actually has more options than the iPhone does when it comes to tweaking the video. Tweaking the video options, night vision, all that type of stuff. It has more features that I'm still playing with. The only other criticism I'd have is image stabilization while moving. That's one thing the iPhone has that I think is superior to this, but I shoot a lot of stuff from tripod, so if I keep this on a tripod, then it works fine. So I've really been happy with this. A lot of you guys have asked, what am I shooting with? And I no longer shoot with a No Pro. I've just really been discouraged with how poorly those have performed, the most recent iterations of those. So switching to an iPhone. And the really neat thing about shooting with a phone is it has more practical uses than just being a camera. Even with this, I can do all my Google work, because I love using Google products, even on an iPhone, but I can use all my Google work here, still get text messages here, all that. And I don't have service on this. I didn't go to any of my carriers and pay a monthly fee for service. But I'm going to list all the details in the specs and of course a link to it so you can check it out. And we'll continue to use this. I'm definitely going to add this to my camera arsenal. I've been shooting a lot of stuff. Some of the woodshop work I've been shooting dual cameras, so the primary camera and secondary camera, and this is coming in real handy. And I love, when I traveled to Arizona, it was awesome taking two phones, throwing them in a kit, and that's my camera kit versus the old days of a full bag for DSLR. You're worrying about those more fragile cameras getting busted in transport through the airport. But check it out if you're interested. Now let's get back to our video. So before we get into it, let's do a quick Topo 101 and get people caught up just to make sure everyone knows some of the basic details of the topo map. This will just take a second. Well, the most distinguishing characteristic of a topo map are the contour lines. And contour lines are simply lines that connect all the points on the map that share the same elevation. So that's why in West Virginia you see them kind of snake all over the place. If we were going out into the plains, they'd probably not be very exciting. Every fifth contour line you'll see is bolded, and that's called an index line. And that index line usually has the elevation listed, and it's usually a nice round number. That's why it's called the index line. It's indexing the elevation, so you can use that to easily calculate any of the contour line elevations. It's also important to recognize the contour interval. So what is the representation between each contour line? In this map I'm using here, this old USGS, it is 20 feet. You'll see sometimes 40 or even 80 feet intervals. So you want to check that with the contour map you're using. And there's also shading. Shading designates vegetation density. So on this map, the green would represent the forested area, the white would be cleared or pastured grazable. And since this is almost 70 years old, we're going to disregard that because that's not accurate here anymore. Appalachian hardwood forest grows back every 10 days, it seems like. So knowing that basic information and looking at a map of my property, we can determine some things pretty quickly. Like, first of all, on the back corner, or the southwesternlymost portion of my property, is my tallest point at 1,120 feet above sea level. Contrasting that, at the front of the property, down near the main watershed, is the lowest part of the property, which is somewhere around 860 to 880 feet in elevation. When we do the math on that, I believe that's about 260 feet in relief. So from the highest point to the lowest point is a difference of 260 feet. We can also see by studying the contour lines where they come in and dip and they make these little points, we can see all the watersheds. Now, I know not everybody likes that term, but to me that's streams, stream cuts. Can't call them canyons, and they only run water during heavy rain events. But there's these little recesses in the side of the mountain that create these pockets. And that's a quick way that I can look at that and determine, okay, where's the water running and how many different fingers or how many different watersheds does this main watershed have? So there's one watershed in particular that's very pronounced on that map, and it's this one right here in the boar pasture. And this is what it looks like in real life. So you can get an idea of, when you see that little V in the map, this is what it looks like in real life. And you think, okay, and that helps you realize that this is a very pronounced watershed. It's much, much different than the other ones. So let's take a closer look at two specific areas on our topo map of my property. And the first is right here. It's what I call Boar Knob. This is inside our boar pasture, but it's this little finger of land that comes down and kind of breaks over steep on all sides. But you can see on the contour lines just how they're spread out a little bit more here. So when I see those contour lines be wider, then it makes sense when I look at it in real life. Okay, yeah, this actually has more gradual slope to it versus going over into the watershed beside Boar Knob or going down to the main stream area. So then I take that same knowledge and I can apply it to the entire property map and see, oh, there's places that are very similar to Boar Knob, or at least they have the same type of slope. But let's go look at the exact opposite. So I know the camera's not going to do this justice, but now I'm over here on the south ridge, and you can see that peak up there. That's substantial. I'm standing here on the topo map, and that peak is represented on the map here. And you can see how much closer the topo lines run together. So you see that on the topo map. You can use the scale of the map and figure out just how much rise and run are in play on this hillside. And I can't do anything with this hillside. In fact, some of this hillside's moving this way. It's so steep. So I can look at that map pretty quickly and say, okay, that's pretty much going to be unusable land. The only thing it's going to be good for is growing trees. So you can look at a topo map and pretty quickly get an idea of, is this land impassable? Is this land gently sloped? Is this land tabletop flat? Does this land have little benches? I'm going to turn the camera around and show you what a little bench looks like. So let's get our bearings back on the map here in the direction you're facing. So we're actually looking down to where the house is, but the house sits way down over the hill here. But there's a nice little flat bench. In fact, I thought about making an impoundment here because there's a depression from a slip, so it may not be a smart idea to mess with water here. But there's a flat enough space here, I could easily build a very large barn. So in looking at that topo map, I see super steep behind it, but those contour lines start to open up a little bit before they go down the mountain again. And then they actually open up a little bit again before they go to the watershed. So knowing how to read that topo map and get an idea, well, if I look on 3D Google Earth, this place just looks like a 45-degree angle coming down. It just doesn't have any of that detail. But the topo map's going to give me that detail to say, most of this isn't going to be accessible or isn't going to be usable for most things. Most of this may be a steep slope, but there are portions of it that if we can gain access with trails or roads, they can become quite usable. So you may be wondering, well, is this really worth the effort doing this? Well, if you're looking for land, I say yes. And I want to give you 6 reasons as to why it's worth the effort. Understanding these topo maps will help give you a better understanding of potential infrastructure areas, like building a house, a barn, or other structures, especially if you're looking in areas like West Virginia, anywhere in Appalachia where there's slope, you can get an idea pretty quickly. All right, if I'm going to put a house there on that south-facing slope, is there enough area to put a house, have a yard, have a driveway, all of those type of things? You can get a pretty good understanding of that quickly. Number 2, you can also find areas that have a gentle enough slope that you could use for things like gardens or chicken tractors, all these things that you could do without having to do terracing or without having to do some really serious engineering to get those things to work. And looking at a topo map, you can easily determine where south-facing slope is. So where we're standing right now is north-facing. I would want to do very little on this side when it came to trying to grow things or trying to do any solar energy, any of that type of stuff. I'd want to be over there. So not only could I see south-facing, but I also see the degree of the slope south-facing. So along those same lines, knowing the degree of slope over an X distance can help you if you're going to be using water, hydraulics, to make your homestead function. I think of Joel Salatin's farm where he has a pond at higher elevation and he can determine the water pressure that he's going to get down to his pastures based upon that slope. You could do the same thing when prospecting land. Okay, there's 260 feet of relief over the course of a quarter mile. I could get X amount of pressure from that. And another point that I think is so critical, especially for y'all looking for land in other areas that you're not going to be able to drive to quickly, is that it's going to give you a pretty good idea of the amount of slope and be able to compare that to the price. So if somebody's wanting $5,000 an acre and the contour lines are all crammed together, no, ain't happening. But if you look at it and say, wow, there's actually some really nice benches on here, or this is a really nice gradual slope, it justifies the $5,000 an acre. I've talked to some of you all that are buying land sight unseen, and you think, well, it's super cheap, it's less than $1,000 an acre, and they say it's sloped, but how bad could it be? Trust me, it can be bad. If you're just looking for some place to grow trees or maybe to hunt on, not a big deal. But if you're going to try to build something and build a homestead on it, it can become a very big deal. So in your property search, if you come across a listing that says, here's 30 acres for sale with a gradual north-facing slope, you can look at the topo real quick, and if it looks like this, then just keep on scrolling. So once you get a hang of using topo maps, you can use that knowledge to investigate potential tracts that you may be interested in, even if they're across the country. And what makes that even better is the USGS has the entire United States available in quadrangles, high-res PDFs that you can download and be able to access that information totally for free. I'll post a link below so you can access that information. Well, I hope you found this information useful. If you're looking for land and you're not able to lay eyes on it immediately, use a topo map to help you get a better idea of how the land lays before you spend the money to drive or fly out there to set eyes on it. Well, I pray y'all have a great week. Take care.